Монолит. Он ушел от нас. Не оставляй меня, Монолит. Не оставляй нас, твоих детей. Мы сильны твоей волей, Монолит. Ты направил нас. Ты дал нам видеть и знать. Почему мы не слышим твой голос? Монолит, почему ты оставил нас? Мы плачем. Мы ждем. Монолит. Монолит. Вернись к покинутым детям своим. Монолит, твои дети ждут тебя. Твою мудрость. Твою силу. Твой свет.
Монолит, я твой верный слуга.
Only the silence of stone remained, vast and unyielding, beneath a sky that had forgotten them. For a long time, stalkers spun tales about the winding path leading from Lake Yantar to the Red Forest. In hushed voices tinged with melancholy and dread, they would say no human foot had ever set upon it, for each step carried the threat of a harrowing death in the jaws of fearsome anomalies. These anomalies had appeared in the same days when the forest's foliage had turned sinister hues of red, ominous yet no less enchanting for it. It was as if overnight the wooded landscape had taken on the semblance of flesh or some organ of an incomprehensible entity, and the trails that cut through it had grown into veins formed to nourish that being with any living creature foolish or careless enough to find itself in such a place. Yet, with the same terrifying swiftness with which it had arisen, the situation changed one day after a massive zone discharge, an emission that swept away the barriers along the path, seemingly shaped by an inscrutable will, a will intent on offering the curious a chance to uncover the secrets of this alien world. Few were those who walked it without pausing to gaze at the enchanted expanse, encircled by a stone fence with a small, rusted gate, still bearing traces of once blue paint. The spell of that place was deepened by the little river on the left, while the densely packed trees, ablaze with red leaves, beckoned wanderers to explore the depths framed by their canopies. And yet they stood silent, holding within them the grim secret behind their hypnotic stillness, for no fortunate soul had yet dared such a journey and returned to speak of the experience. It was as if, in the shadows they wove, Aleshin, the forest warden, watched jealously over the beauty and peace of his unmoving herd. And yet, time, as always, gradually opens doors and reveals many truths. So the stalkers came to learn that there was someone who could move through the gloom of this mystical realm as though it were his home. On the fringes of the described landscape lives the Forester, the only man in the entire trilogy known to have inhabited the exclusion zone even before the catastrophe of 1986, and who still remembers the once green groves. Like a favored child of this mysterious entity, the old man seems chosen for a purpose, endowed with the ability to navigate seemingly impassable paths choked with anomalies. The weight of experience etched into a face lined with deep wrinkles has turned him into a living archive of fantastic tales, stories that to many may sound like the ramblings of a senile fool. Yet those who show breadth of spirit and patience for the old man open themselves to secrets far too heavy for the shallow minds and narrow awareness of those among stalkers who seek only to reduce their adventure to a lucrative hunt for artifacts. Only the curious, thoughtful adventurers can find in his words fragments of an explanation for the origin of the zone. For the old man speaks of a city of the dead where spirits now roam, but one may well wonder whether the living ever truly dwelled there. From his account, we learn of the strange behavior of the former residents of a nearby settlement, people with unorthodox thoughts and weary eyes, who wandered the cramped, blind streets of the city like specters without a will of their own. The Forester recounts their relationship with the Soviet authorities and the intensity of their love and devotion proportionate only to their poverty and the criminality of the communist paradise. Like victims of a perverse experiment in mind control, these unfortunate souls would zealously chant praises to the red mist, even as their cheeks hollowed into toothless mouths, their eyes became ever more pronounced on the heads of living skeletons, and their faces paled from hunger. Stranger still was the fact that this was a settlement of scientists and employees of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, people from whom one would expect clarity of mind and sharp critical thought. It would turn out, however, that their connection to the plant was not merely professional. They had become fatefully fused with the fission reactors of that facility. On the night of the catastrophe and the first emission, each and every one of them vanished from the face of the earth, scorched by some unknown energy, leaving behind only shadows etched into the walls of their homes. And though in Slavic mythology one of the gravest curses is for a man to be left without a shadow, we find ourselves in a world where the shadows have been left without people. The lives they live seem not to have been their own, but alone granted by the mercy and goodwill of some force which, in the moment of its own disappearance, chose to erase them as well. Thus, the inversion of mythological symbolism feels more than fitting. Mere existence in that cursed place was not a gift from God or a fortunate accident, it was a part of a calculation or a plan, devised by creators whose intentions no one could grasp, and whose goodwill was more than suspect. And though only the forester still remembers their fate, the name of the city endures among stalkers, weighing heavily on their speech and conjuring scenes that burden the minds and poison the dreams. The name of the city where dead souls wander. Limansk. Listeners will hopefully forgive the shift in style and the creative liberties taken in conveying the story of the forester in Limansk, but I do believe it is the best way to draw attention to the relatively subtle revelation of key information about the zone, something S.T.A.L.K.E.R certainly does not lack. Of course, as mentioned in the introduction, uncovering such details requires patience, thoroughness, and a willingness to read through the parts of NPC dialogue not covered by voice acting. Beyond the broader narrative involving underground laboratories, agroprom, and the behind-the-scenes machinations uncovered through documents found during main quests, it is precisely the personal experience of the zone's sole native inhabitant that lends the story depth and authenticity. Although he is not the only one whose words hint at a hidden game, figures such as Professor Kruglov, Professor Ozersky, and General Krylov also offer their own insights. It is only the forester whose testimony stems from direct, lived experience. Thus, his account of how the villagers avoided the city overshadowed by a series of radio towers, and how they would suffer piercing headaches when approaching it, adds weight to the mystery surrounding Limansk. It is my conviction that the story behind it echoes the masterpiece, The Doomed City, written by the Strugatsky brothers. One of the central themes that fascinated this extraordinarily talented duo, and which forms the backbone of the novel, is the tension between order and chaos and the problems and benefits that emerge from them. In their view, this tension represents an unresolved factor in human existence and in the formation of functional society. Chaos, though a source of destruction and suffering, also harbors the seed of freedom, yet precisely because of that destructive nature, true enjoyment of this freedom is impossible, prompting calls for control. The tragedy of human existence lies in the fact that attempts to establish such control on a broader scale inevitably lead to oppression and terror, whether by the state, a party, a faction, or any other organized force. As such, these efforts become the very cause of the loss of true human agency, the capacity from which order can naturally emerge, free will. In the words of one of the novel's protagonists who reflects on his companion's doubts about the purpose and nature of the experiment around which the book's plot revolves, "You have a rather strange perspective on all this. This isn't a kingdom of absolute evil. It is more like chaos, and we're here to put it in order. And how can we put it in order if we don't possess free will?" This question has undoubtedly shaped the very video game we are discussing, so in that sense Limansk is the experiment. However, we do not possess enough information to discern the initial intentions of its experimenters, and yet, whatever those intentions were, they clearly culminated in the erasure of freedom and ultimately the disappearance of the human test subjects. On the other hand, if we turn to indirect interpretation, we find clear symbolism in the fact that once the path to the city opened, the warriors of freedom and duty rushed toward it only to annihilate each other in their battle for control. The clash between the bearers of freedom and the bearers of order resulted in mutual destruction and their disappearance from that accursed place. By the beginning of Clear Sky, Limansk became a stronghold of Monolith. The irreconcilable deadlock between the two opposing drives, order and freedom, results in a totalitarian force that exists solely for its own sake. Consciousness, the mother of the very need to resolve this tension, the seed of the perception of both order and freedom, is lost. Is this not a development that threatens the entire zone, perhaps even humanity as a whole? Be that as it may, the narrative surrounding Limansk offers another crucial layer of information. From everything stated so far, we begin to glimpse the existence of covert Soviet research activities, which, judging by the available documents and commentary from various zone figures, were directed toward mind control, initially of animals, later of humans. This becomes evident already in the main quests of Shadow of Chernobyl and the notes and correspondence scattered throughout the underground facilities, and is reinforced by details such as those found in the story of Limansk. Yet, as fantastical as this premise may sound, it is actually grounded in historical reality. It draws upon real Soviet attempts to establish precisely this form of control. Certainly, the roots of such ambitions lie much earlier in the days before the USSR was fully formed, when early enthusiasts, who would ultimately prove to be murderers and enemies of freedom, dreamed of a new man. Dissatisfied with the existing one, they were determined to reshape him at any cost. It did not take long before their fantasies of mastering one's own body and emotions transformed into a thirst to control the minds of others, a thirst that eventually took on concrete form.